All right, it is 11 a.m. Mountain Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the Eclipse Books and Authors webinar. This webinar will be recorded, so if you have to pop out at any time, we'll be sharing the recording with you afterwards. And I do want to note, as you may have noticed, this webinar is actually set up like a meeting. So you do have access to your camera and your microphone. So when we get to the Q&A, or if we have discussion questions, if you want to unmute yourself or turn on your camera, we would love for you to participate in that way. Otherwise, you are welcome to keep your cameras off and stay muted and participate in the chat. Just be sure that you are muted when you don't have anything to share, so that we can really listen and hear our speakers without any type of feedback. So I am Claire Ratcliffe-Adams. I'm an education associate at the Space Science Institute, and I'm really happy to be here today and hear about all of these great resources that you can use for the upcoming eclipses. I'm also joined with Sky Reed-Mills, our education program assistant from the Space Science Institute. Sky is really keeping this whole eclipse project going, dealing with so many different eclipse glasses orders, and has just really been just keeping the machine running. So thank you, Sky, for all the work you do with the SEAL project. Also, Sky has links throughout the project, or throughout the webinar today. If you want to know where to order these books, how to download the apps that we'll be talking about, Sky will be dropping one main link bank in the chat. It's there right now. So all of the links that are embedded within this PowerPoint presentation, you can access there. So don't feel like you have to write everything down, the second you see it. But yeah, so Sky will kind of be in chat support as well. So we are very lucky to be joined by four authors today. Our last author, Jeff Bennett, is unable to join us today, so I'm going to do my best to share their resources. But I'm going to turn it over to the authors to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into the books that they are presenting on today. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Fracknoy and Dennis Schatz, authors of When the Sun Goes Dark.
So do you want us to introduce ourselves and then stop and let everybody introduce themselves?
Sure, just the authors. So Andy,
Sure.
maybe you can go first.
So I'm Andrew Fracknoy. I'm a retired astronomer and college professor, and not yet retired textbook author and science fiction author.
All right, I'm Dennis Schatz, and as I said, I went to the University of Wisconsin, so I have a soft spot for that place. Got a degree in astronomy there, and that's my background also, similar to Andrew's. I'm a children's book author, 23 children's books with over 2 million copies sold. And I'm delighted to work with Andy on this. I'm also a past president of the National Science Teaching Association. So I've been very involved with science education, both in school through the NSTA, and then I was at Pacific Science Center, a nonprofit public museum for many years.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Sandberg, and I am a mom. I have 2 daughters. I'm also a military wife and consider myself a storyteller. I'm originally from Wyoming, where the 2017 eclipse went through, and I own a communications company now here in Lincoln, Nebraska. My story is that I unexpectedly fell in love with total solar eclipses, and one appeared right in my backyard, and that's the experience I hope a lot of you have, and what I'm committed to helping happen.
My name is David Barron. I'm a science writer. For many years, I was a science correspondent and editor for NPR. Now I write books, but I'm also a passionate eclipse chaser. I've seen 8 total eclipses around the world, and I'm looking forward to my 9th next April and my 2nd annular eclipse just a month from now.
Thanks, everyone. And Jeff Bennett is a professional astronomer and also a fantastic writer. He has written several children's books, and books for teens and adults as well. He has self-published these books and donates the books, but you can also purchase them. And so in that link bank that Sky dropped, that will give you the link for where you can purchase the books that Jeff Bennett has written. He's also developed an app that will be very useful for you during the eclipses if you want to know exactly, when the eclipse is going to happen in your location, exactly how long the duration of the eclipses will be, plus a ton of other great learning resources in that app, which I will be explaining later. So yeah, big thanks to all of our authors joining us today. And so just real quick before we get into the books, I would love to hear from you all, and you can unmute yourself if you want to share or just drop it in the chat. But what is your favorite book relating to a STEM topic? So this can be a book that you use in story times when you're doing STEM programs for younger kids, or this could be a book that you loved growing up, or something that you're enjoying reading right now relating to anything science, technology, engineering, or math. And I'll start while you're thinking and typing your answers in the chat. But I am involved in another project right now called STEM Tales, where we are working with astronauts on the International Space Station, as well as STEM professionals around the world, to do video story time for kids ages 4 to 8. And so one of my favorite books right now that we have sent up to the ISS and has been read by an astronaut is Rocket Says Look Up by Nathan Bryan. It's a really cute book about a young girl who is dreaming of being an astronaut, and there's going to be a comet going by in the nighttime. And so she's trying to tell everyone in her family, like, look up tonight, it's going to be really cool. And she has the hardest time with her older brother, who's a teenager who just wants to look down at his phone. But it ends up just being a delightful story of this young girl's inspiration of looking up at the night sky. So we are here. We've got some great comments in the chat. Cosmos by Carl Sagan. Mary Roach's books. I have not read her books yet, but I am excited I'm going to be adding these to my list. Emily says, as a kid, I loved Captain Swifty Counts to 50. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. David shares, I love nature books. Oh, and adores Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. I love that book as well. That is like constantly on my nightstand. I love to read it before I go to bed. Annie Dillard is absolutely fantastic. The Questionnaires series, Rosie Revere Engineer. Yes, absolutely. That's another one of our books. Rosie Revere's Engineer for the STEM Tales project. That one has already been read on the International Space Station. And we're turning that into an episode with PBS. Awesome. And there's so many books. I don't think we have time to read through all of these, but it is fantastic to know that you guys are already really familiar with STEM books, and that they play a really big role in your reading adventures. So awesome. Keep adding them to the list. And I'm going to be taking notes on these books to check out. But I think it is time to turn it over to our first authors. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy Fracknoy and Dennis Schatz to talk about When the Sun Goes Dark and a little bit about the upcoming eclipses.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Claire. And welcome, everyone. We love working with librarians, who are the backbone of the nervous system of our country's information network. We think you guys are incredibly important, especially these days. So we want to tell you, Dennis and I, about a book that we wrote for the nonprofit NSTA Press, the National Science Teaching Association Press, which is a book to explain eclipses to children. But before we do that, if I can have the next slide. Since I'm one of the nerdy astronomers here, we thought we'd explain a little bit about what's happening in the next school year, and that the United States and all of North America is lucky enough to be able to experience 2 different eclipses of the sun, which is quite unusual. The next slide tells you that you don't need to write down any of the things about eclipses that we're telling you here, because we've put together for this same project a booklet, which is designed to help librarians understand and explain eclipses. It gives you guidance on where to find people to help your library. It has a send home sheet that you can send home about each eclipse in English and in Spanish for your patrons. And this booklet is at a short URL, bit.ly/eclipses for libraries. And all of these, remember, are going to be in the chat, and they're in that list that Sky has already put together. But in this booklet, you can have a lot more information than we're able to give you in a few minutes. The next slide. So basically what happens during an eclipse of the sun is that the moon gets between the sun and the earth. And there's a remarkable coincidence on Earth that, as seen from our planet, the moon and the sun are the same size in the sky. The moon's a lot smaller, but it's closer to us. The sun's a lot bigger, but it's much further away. And it just works out that the two can be exactly the same size in the sky, and the moon can get in front of the sun and block the sun. And we call that an eclipse of the sun. The next slide shows you the way that things can line up. When everything lines up precisely, we get the moon completely covering the sun, and that's called a total eclipse of the sun. And you can see that the shadow of that eclipse only hits a small spot on the Earth. As the Earth turns, though, that spot moves along. So in April, when we're going to have a total eclipse of the sun, the path of that eclipse will be about 100 miles wide. And if you're in that path, you will see the sun totally eclipsed by the moon. If you're not in that path, you'll see a partial eclipse of the moon. And then, because the moon's orbit is not quite a circle, but is actually an ellipse, sometimes it can happen that everything lines up, but the moon's a little further away in its orbit and can't quite cover the entire sun, leaving a ring of fire on the edge of the dark moon. Another word for ring is annulus, so we call this an annular eclipse. And that's what we're going to have October 14th. We're going to have an annular eclipse, again, only visible in a path about 100 miles wide on Earth, but everyone else in North America will see a partial eclipse of the sun in both October and April. Next slide. Just in case you don't believe me that there is a spot, a dark spot created by this lineup of celestial bodies, here's a picture of the Earth from space during such an eclipse, and you can see the dark shadow of the moon on the face of our planet. The next slide shows you what is an amazing realization that we've come to. In fact, this exact lineup where the moon and the sun are exactly the same size as seen from our planet is only true on Earth. We've calculated on all the other planets with which we share our solar system, is there such an exact lineup? And there isn't. Here, for example, you can see one of the moons of Mars trying to eclipse the sun as seen from the surface of Mars, and you can see the little moon Phobos doing a pathetic job of making an eclipse. It's just not the right shape or the right size. So you and your patrons are quite lucky to be born on a planet where total eclipses are possible. The next slide shows you the dilemma that we've been faced with and that we've enlisted your help for. In October and in April, we've calculated that the number of people who will see some kind of eclipse is almost 500 million. And that's an astounding science outreach challenge. And it's that challenge that we've enlisted your help in. The next slide now leads us to the book that we've put together. This is for children, and I'm going to turn things over to Dennis Schatz to tell you more about the book itself.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for everybody being here. It's great to see so many participants. When the Sun Goes Dark, as I mentioned, as Andy mentioned, was developed for the 2017 eclipse. And actually, many libraries have it in their collection now. You may have it in yours. I was just out at a library doing a program last week, and I noticed 4 of them were actually available for people to check out. So I hope that people will consider looking at what they have. Still quite relevant. We know we've had people who suggested 2017 was makes it an old book, but the nature of eclipses doesn't change. So it's quite appropriate for this one, and in 2045, when we have the next total solar eclipse going through, it'll still be a valid book to have. The next slide, just to give you a sense of the book, it's all about 2 grandparents who are eclipse chasers who happen to come home just in time for their granddaughter's birthday. And of course, the 2 grandchildren want to know, so why are they eclipse chasers? Why do they go away for this? What causes eclipses and so on? So the book follows a very interactive approach. The next slide shows how the grandparents are using the kids. Their head is the earth, tennis balls are the moon, and the light bulb that's had the shade taken off, or the lamp that's had the shade taken off. So the light bulb is now the sun. And so the grandparents are essentially becoming the teachers for their grandchildren. And this is all about phases of the moon. Next slide. We even have uses of hula hoops, which is a pretty typical way to demonstrate why we don't have eclipses every month. If the moon comes around every month in front of the sun, why don't we get an eclipse every month? And this helps explain about the tilt of the moon's orbit relative to the direction of the sun. So it's basically goes through, you not only understand what happens or what causes solar eclipses, but what causes lunar eclipses also, and safety tips and so on. Again, the grandparents being the teachers of the grandchildren. Just to give you a next slide, to give you a sense of what people think about it. This is from Julia Plummer, who's a professor at Pennsylvania State University. Perfect book for the age level. I won't read the whole thing, but a great endorsement of the book. Next slide comes from a former science teacher. I can't imagine a better book for youngsters to understand the Earth-Moon system. It was chosen, if you go to the next slide, we were quite delighted. It was named an Outstanding Science Trade Book for Students, 2017. Typically, there are about 300 books that are reviewed by the committee that chooses these, and only 30, so 10% make it. And we're quite delighted that When the Sun Goes Dark was chosen as an Outstanding Science Trade Book. Next slide. And this is again in the materials that Sky put together. This is where you can purchase it, either through NSTA Press or independent IPG, through Independent Publishers Group. And with that, next slide. We wish you clear skies for both eclipses. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis and Andrew. And for those of you who have access to state library kits, the Solar Eclipse Activity for Libraries kits that we sent out to, I think, almost all states in the US have a copy of this book in it as well. So if you are if you have that capacity to order from your state library a copy of those kits that you can kind of reserve, you will get a copy of this book. So next, I want to just kind of tie this back into how you can use these books in Eclipse programs, and just a couple of resources for you to check out when creating programs with activities. So I want to put a plug in here for our STEM Activity Clearinghouse. You can access that at clearinghouse.starnetlibraries.org. This website has over 500 hands-on STEM activities, and one of our featured collections is the seal collection. So when you go to the homepage, you will see this little icon, our little seal wearing his eclipse glasses, giving a thumbs up. And if you click into that, there's about 26 activities relating to solar science and the eclipses. So one activity from that collection that ties in, I think, really nicely with When the Sun Goes Dark, is called Why Don't Eclipses Happen Every Month? So this is another way to explore, what is happening with the positioning of our objects in space, using 3D models of the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, to demonstrate both solar and lunar eclipses. And again, because of that, the tilt of the Moon's orbit around the Earth, it really illustrates in a hands-on visual way, especially for youngsters trying to kind of understand what's happening with these, colossal events. But it illustrates why we do not see eclipses at every full and every new moon. So very similar to the activity in the book with the hula hoop, also using the balls and your head as the earth. This is just another way that you do a little bit of crafting and demonstrate this activity. So this activity takes about 20 minutes. It's really good for tweens and teens to kind of start to understand these concepts. And then you just need a light and something to cast a shadow on. So if you have old CDs lying around that you don't know what to do with in your collection, this is a great activity to use those. The link to the activity and the guide is in that link bank that Sky just put in the chat. All right, and next up, we have Jamie Sandberg talking about Total Solar Eclipse, a Stellar Friendship Story.
All right, thank you, Claire. As Claire said, I'm the author of a new children's picture book called Total Solar Eclipse, a Stellar Friendship Story. It was published this summer by It's All Stories, LLC. It's targeted to kids 4 to 100 and is really best as a read aloud book. It's a fiction story, and it's been created to teach kids about the total solar eclipse phenomenon in a memorable way and in ways that they can understand through storytelling, but also demonstrates the unexpected ways we can shine together. My editor, who is an award-winning children's picture book author herself, Marcia Diane Arnold, I really loved what she had to say about it, which was, this book goes beyond the safety and science of an eclipse. It's about envy, friendship, and what fun it can be for two, not just one, to share center stage. So on the next slide, I'll go into just a little bit more about the storyline. So Sun is our narrator and is seriously out of sorts about the upcoming total solar eclipse. Will Earthlings go blind when they break this big rule about not looking directly at the sun? What will Earthlings think when the light they depend on so easily goes out in the daytime? But maybe worst of all, Sun thinks one of its oldest friends in the solar system, Moon, is being rude at best by, you got it, stealing its spotlight. So with help from comet delivery, Sun sends some letters to Earth and eventually Moon to try to calm its nerves. But it's not really listening to their answers because Sun is already just absolutely sure something terrible will happen. And I think we've probably all been there when we ask the questions and don't listen to what the people have to say in response. As the eclipse unfolds, Sun recognizes, hey, Earthlings aren't getting hurt. And oh my gosh, this actually looks like they're having fun, but it's still not enough for Sun. And when totality comes, Sun can't even look. I mean, really, because, the sun or the moon's in front of Sun, but also Sun is afraid. And then, much to Sun's surprise, it hears Earthlings actually love it. They actually think Sun is even more amazing during totality. And that's, of course, because they can see the solar corona, which is truly spectacular sight to see, which we wouldn't be able to see without Moon's help. So Sun realizes in the end that Moon wasn't stealing Sun's light after all. It was helping Sun shine in a totally different way. So it has that social emotional lessons that can go right along with learning about the eclipse. I did want to point out too that the back matter includes a glossary for those solar system terms and eclipse terms, and then also something that's been popular with our parent reviewers in particular, an eclipse memory page so that Earthlings can record their memories so they don't forget their total solar eclipse experience like our narrator, the Sun, tends to do in our story. Those memory pages are also available on the website for free at solareclipsebook.com. On the next slide, speaking of resources, there are some other free resources related to this book that we are proud to be able to offer you. A coloring page that is done by the book's illustrator, Kathleen Gattikin, a Sun's Safe Solar Eclipse Viewing Pledge, which try to say that 3 times fast, but that's also available for download. And then a special resource that we created with this audience particularly in mind, a Stellar Story Walk Toolkit. And I saw Karen in Wisconsin mentioning Story Walk already. So I know some of you are familiar with the Story Walk concept, but others may not be as familiar. So on the next slide, I'm just going to share a little bit of background about what Story Walks are. So the Story Walk project was created several years ago by a woman named Ann Ferguson, and it was in collaboration with her local library, the Kellogg Hubbard Library in Montpelier, Vermont. And the concept was pretty simple. It was to combine early literacy with physical activity and family time together in nature. Story walks have proven to be very popular. They're in all 50 states, and some are permanent. It sounds like Karen's may be more permanent, but some may pop up for events and come and go. I think in Montpelier, you can even check them out from the library, which is pretty cool. So story walks can be on established trails. They can be in store windows, downtown or at the mall. For those of you in the Midwest like me, that it gets cold in those spring months. Sometimes you can end up with snow on days like that. It could be parks, really anywhere you have permission and think would be a good story walk experience is worth trying. A lot of people have questions about copyright for things like that. I know we're all really committed to respecting the intellectual property. Anne and her team did a lot of great legwork on that. And what they found is that as long as you don't modify the pages, you can carefully deconstruct a book and mount the pages and then post them on these posts. This technique that they developed takes about 3 books and some patience and maybe a little Martha Stewart DIY skills, but that's certainly a way to go. With the toolkit that we've created with It's All Stories, we're actually hopefully cutting out some of that work and giving you the files and then copyright permission to print 1 copy of a story walk. So hopefully cutting out some of that cut and paste work. Then of course the next answer or the next question is, how much does this cost altogether? And the answer is usually it depends, but nobody likes that answer. So I did try to put some numbers to it, and if you're resourceful and you're able to upcycle some sign materials, it can cost as little as $150. If you have it printed directly onto a sign and really make it pretty turnkey by going to a local sign company, then you'd be looking at closer to that $400 mark, which begs the next question, I think, is, you might be thinking, hey, that's pretty reasonable, but we're a public library and we still don't have the budget. So can we get the community to pitch in? And that answer is absolutely. I think this is a really unique project to go along with your Eclipse activities, because that sponsor recognition is built in. You literally have 20 signs that you're only using the front of, so you can certainly recognize some community partners on the back. On the next slide, we'll just quickly go through how to actually get this done. So there's a how-to guide in the toolkit if you choose to do that. It goes into more detail, but in general, it's pretty simple. With the toolkit, you send the files to the printer, have them laminate it, 11 by 17 paper. You make sure you laminate it all around so that the weather can't get in and ruin your story walk, and it's more durable. If your story walk is going to be put into the ground outside, 2 tested and approved methods for creating the signs are using corrugated plastic and hot glue. You can hot glue your laminated pages right on that. I have done this and then forgot about it in my yard for a couple weeks, and it was perfect. So I can recommend that method. And then you can also you get wooden stakes at your home supply store, a Home Depot or Lowe's, Menards, something like that, and use some Velcro and put it up that way. Again, these are only some suggestions, things that other people have done that work, but you can use the resources if you love this and figure out what works for you. I think the biggest hint is to really think about the out of the box and how you can use something like this to really accomplish the goals that you have for your STEM programming, for your library. Perhaps one idea is you could take the Solar Eclipse Viewing Pledge and put it at the end of the story walk. And maybe if people take that pledge, that's how they get the glasses that sales provided you. You can also use it to put one of the sealed programming activities alongside one of the pages along the walk, which I think Claire's going to talk about. Like, you know, the shadow page could have the shadow activity. So you can really get creative, I think, with this. You guys will have much better ideas than I do, I'm sure. But I'm here to help, and my publisher's here to help. If you need anything else at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. We really want to see you be successful and sharing that success with you. So I wanted to give a shout out to Anne Holland with the SEAL program for suggesting the story walk. I think it's really cool. And my friends Richard and Deb at the Leeds Scotts Bluff Public Library helped me do some research as well, of course. Anne Ferguson with her original project and all the great resources with that. So on the next page, that's really it. I encourage you to get your copy of Total Solar Eclipse, A Stellar Friendship Story from the publisher. That's solareclipsebook.com. We do have the hardcovers exclusively available through that link at this time. And we also have premium paperbacks through there. And those are in stock, so get your orders in so that you don't have to wait. We're happy to work on any bulk orders or any other activities. And with that, I mean, please tag us on Instagram. We'd love to see what you're doing. And just thank you for the time and the opportunity to share our title with you. And best of luck with all of your Eclipse programming. It's really going to be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie. And I just want to read one of the comments in the chat, just for those of you watching the recording, just as another outside of the box, how to do story walks. Crescencia have shared that one of the school districts printed books onto vinyl banners and attached them to playground fencing. So just another way to kind of display story walks. All right, and here is another activity I wanted to share that I think fits in really well with Jamie's book. But this is an activity called Moon Bear's Shadow, and it is also in that SEAL Activity Clearinghouse collection. But this is an activity that is really versatile. It can be done as a facilitated program with an actual story where you read a book called Moon Bear's Shadow. It's, you know, a storybook about how a little bear is exploring their own shadow, and they're trying to figure out, why can't I get away from my shadow? And then as the sun moves across the sky, the shadow changes. At one point it disappears altogether. So it's really helping little kids kind of understand what's going on with shadows, which of course relates to a solar eclipse, because what we're experiencing is the moon's shadow on the Earth. So you can do this as a facilitated program, or it comes with little challenge cards and a table sign in both English and Spanish. And you can have this out as a passive program, just with little props. So this is something you can do, you know, right before you go on a story walk and learn more about the solar eclipse, something that you do after, or something that you do as a series of story times, learning about eclipses and what's going on. But it's really simple. You move a flashlight around an object, and in this case it's a little toy bear, and we have little toy trees and little suns that you can stick onto the flashlight, just for that added, you know, bringing the positive learning environment into and that delight into the kids' learning. But a really fun activity that, yeah, you can check out on the link bank that Sky's been dropping in the chat. All right, and so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to David Barron to talk about American Eclipse. I will stop sharing, so David, you have control over the screen.
Okay, let's see if this works. All right. So I am now sharing the screen. All right.
That's good.
Okay. So we're going to be shifting gears here a bit, because my book is quite different from the others that you've been hearing about, in that this is not a kid's book. It's for adults, although it's been used in some high schools. And also, while there's plenty of science in it, it's really a work of history. So the book is called American Eclipse, and it's a true story set in the 19th century. In fact, it opens on an important national birthday, and that is the centennial. It was 1876. America was celebrating all that it had become in just 100 years. The Civil War by then was over. We had reunited. The population of the country then was 50 million, and it was growing fast. We were a vibrant, can-do nation. We were building big cities, and we were spreading west. Back then, the mindset The rallying cry was Manifest Destiny. The Transcontinental Railroad had recently been completed, opening new territory to settlement and sparking clashes between the pioneers and Native Americans. We were at this time an adolescent nation. We were known for our industrial might, but we were considered intellectually immature. Europe was the place where respectable literature and music and art was produced, and Europe led the world in science. But just 2 years after the centennial, America would have its chance to show the world what it could do in science, specifically in astronomy. You see, back in that era, total eclipses were incredibly important for astronomers. Eclipses offered rare opportunities for scientists to unravel the mysteries of the sun. What is this great ball of fire at the center of our solar system? What is it made of? What fuels it? Well, during a total solar eclipse, astronomers could actually look at the sun's atmosphere and immediate surroundings. So whenever a total eclipse would occur somewhere on Earth, scientists would launch grand expeditions to the far corners of the globe to intercept the moon's shadow. Now, the Europeans were the leaders in eclipse studies, but in 1878, the moon's shadow was set to visit America's backyard. The date was July 29th, 1878, and the path of totality ran right down the American frontier from Montana Territory to Texas. So here was America's chance to shine, or an opportunity to slip up and embarrass ourselves. But if all went well, we would show the rest of the world what we were capable of as a scientific nation. And so the eclipse was a big national undertaking. Dozens of the era's top scientists traveled to Wyoming, Colorado, and Texas for the eclipse. This is a team from Princeton that camped out in Denver. These astronomers actually set up their telescopes on the roof of a hotel in a gold mining town in the Colorado Rockies. And there were tourists too. Just like today, the public headed to the path of totality. And Denver was so overrun with visitors that the hotels ran out of rooms. But the main characters in my book, the main focus are 3 of the scientists who went west, each of them with much to prove. And the first of them is a very well-known name, and that was Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison in 1878 was just 31 years old, but he was already a global celebrity due to a recent invention, and that was the phonograph. Well, Edison brought to Wyoming another device he had invented, and this one for studying the sun. It was called the thermometer, and I won't go into details here about exactly what it did, but suffice it to say, Edison wanted to use his thermometer during the eclipse to show that he was not just an inventor, that he was not a mere tinkerer, but he was a serious scientist who might make important contributions to astronomy. And here's a group photo from Wyoming in 1878, and Edison is there second from the right. I'll zoom in. That's Edison with his arms folded. And 4 people to the left, this large gentleman holding a hat is another important character in my book. His name was James Craig Watson, and he was a professor of astronomy at the University of Michigan. He came west with the goal of finding a new planet. Now, you see, if you were to look at a solar system chart from that era, like this one, you'll notice something very odd. Between Mercury and the sun, there's another planet, Vulcan. Now, at the time, Vulcan was a hypothetical planet. Many astronomers believed that it had to exist because Mercury's orbit didn't seem to make sense otherwise. Now, no one had reliably ever seen Vulcan, but that wasn't really a surprise. After all, it was believed to orbit so close to the sun that it would never be in the sky at night, and you couldn't see it in the daytime because it would be lost in the sun's glare. About the only time you might catch a glimpse of Vulcan was during the brief midday darkness of a total solar eclipse, when the moon blocked the bright face of the sun, enabling you to see what sits nearby. So James Craig Watson was intent on finding Vulcan and finding fame for being the astronomer who eventually did it. Now, the third main character in my book was a scientist who traveled to the frontier with a very different intent, and her name was Maria Mitchell. Now, Maria Mitchell was by far the best-known female scientist in America in the 19th century. She first came to prominence in 1847 when she discovered a comet and earned a gold medal from the King of Denmark. Well, by 1878, she was teaching astronomy at Vassar, the pioneering all-women's college. No surprise, Mitchell was a staunch advocate for women's higher education, and this was a time when women's colleges were actually coming under attack. Because you see, in 1873, a sensational best-selling book came out that claimed college education could ruin a girl's health. It was written by a prominent Boston doctor, Edward H. Clark, who argued that by taxing the brain, education sapped energy from other parts of a girl's maturing body, including her reproductive organs, and therefore higher learning could turn female college students into sterile, masculine invalids. And I'm not kidding about this. Education, he wrote, could result in, quote, a dropping out of maternal instincts and an appearance of Amazonian coarseness and force. Such persons, he wrote, are analogous to the sexless class of termites. Well, Maria Mitchell believed that this was ridiculous. She encouraged young women to use their brains in her astronomy courses at Vassar. But that wasn't enough. She needed to convince American society that Dr. Clark's book was rubbish. So in 1878, she did something remarkable. As groups of men were assembling eclipse expeditions to Wyoming and Colorado, she assembled an all-female expedition. And so this is the Vassar College Eclipse Party in Denver in 1878. That's Maria Mitchell sitting there on the left. It was, of course, a scientific endeavor, but it was something more as well. It was a kind of political theater to demonstrate to a skeptical public that women could be smart, educated, healthy, and feminine to boot. So these three main characters of mine had a lot on the line, and the eclipse was a kind of a race or a competition, as these three scientists and many others headed west and prepared for those precious 3 minutes to grab their prize during the eclipse. So my book chronicles that race, the stresses, the dangers, the jockeying, the public attention, and in the end, there were a number of victories, especially for the United States as a whole. The papers announced great results from the eclipse studies. Most important observations ever made, said the New York Herald. It was a banner day for America. The eclipse that crossed the frontier enabled this young country to prove to the world that it could do science. It could take on Europe. As one local boasted to a visitor from England, "Sir, Colorado can beat the world in eclipses as in everything else." So the eclipse of 1878 was sort of like the moon landing of 1969. It was a high-profile event that rallied the nation around science and elevated the United States as a global scientific power. Now, I wrote the book with a very specific goal in mind, and that was to make today's modern eclipses teachable moments, not just for science, but for history. The history of our country, the history of invention, the history of women's rights. The book was first published in 2017, right before the total eclipse in August of that year. And that summer, I gave many library talks and spoke to book groups, and I expect to do so again over the next 7 months. The book remains in print, available in hardcover and paperback. It's an ebook and an audiobook, and it's going to be reissued in an updated paperback edition in February, shortly before next year's total eclipse. This new edition will contain an afterword in which I reflect on the importance of the 2017 eclipse and look forward to the one in April of next year. So turning to what you guys can do, what does all this have to do with what you might do for your library patrons? Well, wherever you live, at some point in this country's history, a total eclipse passed either overhead or, more likely, somewhere nearby. And using the internet and archival newspaper databases, you can easily find news coverage of those long ago eclipses wherever you are. And with a little digging, you might find out that some prominent individual was in your town for the eclipse, like President William McKinley, who went to Newport News, Virginia in 1900. You might find out what local people used instead of eclipse glasses back in that era. Well, this guy's looking at the sun through a pane of blue glass, which is a terrible idea. Do not do it. Use only, safe eclipse glasses. But in the 19th century, sky gazers routinely used colored glass to view partial eclipses. Researching the history of eclipses is great fun, and it's not that difficult. And I would encourage you to check out a blog post that I recently wrote. It's on the StarNet community blog, and it offers step-by-step instructions on how you might create your own local eclipse history exhibit for your library or maybe historical society. You could even make this a class project for high school students. So just to wrap up, so much eclipse education is focused on the science for good reason. But I'd encourage you to broaden at least some of your efforts, because by adding a bit of history to the mix, you can reach audiences that may not instantly be attracted by the mechanics of the sun and the moon, but they, like all of us, can be drawn in by stories about people and the past. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. So instead of kind of sharing out some program or activity ideas from our STEM activity clearinghouse, since David already shared some really great ones, I kind of want to turn it back over to you all. If that sparked any ideas specifically for adult programs for the upcoming eclipses, please feel free to share in the chat, book clubs or working with high schoolers to do your own historical project about eclipses in your community. But yeah, put any ideas you have in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself as well. But we would love to hear from you all if this sparked any ideas.
And Claire, I'm trying to stop the screen sharing, but you might just take it over again if you would.
Okay. See if that worked. Awesome. All right. Thanks, David. And yeah, I think we've got some coming in the chat already, but please share if you have any ideas. What eclipse program ideas do you have for adults or some of our older learners, like high schoolers? So Dana shared, I'm excited about the history connection. I think this will appeal to adults. Absolutely. Just watching people's faces during that presentation, I think a lot of folks in this meeting today resonated with that book. And Adrian shared, we're trying to find a book for our adult book club, and this may be a perfect pick. Awesome. All right. Well, keep adding your thoughts in the chat, but we're going to move on to our last resource here. So this is from author, Jeff Bennett. He has created a book called Totality, an Eclipse Guide in Rhyme and Science. That's really great for all ages, as well as developed an app that will be incredibly useful for you during the upcoming eclipses. So just again, a reminder, Jeff Bennett is a professional astronomer and a professor of astronomy and math, and in addition to being an author. So we'll start with the app. So this is a free app called Totality. You can download it anywhere you get your apps, but you can also find links to download it at bigkidscience.com/eclipse, and that link is in the link bank. This is now an app that belongs to the American Astronomical Society. It does not come with any ads. It's completely free for you to download and use. It comes with interactive maps for trip planning. So if you have patrons who are wondering, where can I go to see totality or annularity, this app, if you share it with them, they can figure out where they want to go. It also has details of what you'll see at any location. And there's a learn screen that has videos and activities for folks to just learn more about the science behind what's happening with these eclipses. There is quite a large language support in this app. People can access all of the resources in Spanish, French, and Portuguese. So here's sort of what you'll see when you log into the app. So the screen all the way on the left is what you'll see right away when you first kind of enter the app. Next, if you click on location, you'll see the map location, and that comes with all kinds of details about exactly when the partial eclipse begins, when totality or annularity begins, and how long that will be. And then so that can kind of help you plan out what your events are for the days of these eclipses. The third screen shows options when you click on the lower right menu about directions. So that talks about, just different places along the paths of totality when it's going to be, because even on that path of totality, the time changes just very slightly. The closer you are to the center, the longer you're going to have for those totalities. But that just gives you more information all about the directions that's occurring with these eclipses. And then the final screenshot that you see all the way on the left, or sorry, all the way on the right, is the learn feature. So this is where you can learn about safe viewing, how to look at totality, and when you can take your glasses off if you're in 100% totality. It has information about future eclipses, understanding eclipses, classroom activities, all kinds of additional resources. So this is a really well-rounded app that can help you with your programs and also for giving information to your patrons. So the book that Jeffrey Bennett wrote, whoops, don't know why that's happening. Sorry about that. It's called Totality, an Eclipse Guide in Rhyme and Science. So this is a book that comes with some verses, comes with call out boxes about the science, and it also comes with 2 pairs of eclipse glasses. So the retail price for this book is about $20. You can order from any bookseller. You can also get the ebook for $7, but there is a 30% discount if you buy directly from bigkidscience.com/books. So this is a unique combination of rhyme and science. There is a couplet, a few short verses on each page. There's also illustrations included in the book and a big kid box call out on each page explaining the science details. It also includes activities, a glossary, and a science summary, and is really suitable for all ages. This book has won a number of awards, such as Storytime from Space selection. It was launched to the International Space Station and read aboard that by an astronaut. It's also won the 2023 Children's Book Council Teacher Favorites, the 2023 Children's Book Council Librarian Favorites, the Nautilus Book Award Silver Medal, and the Colorado Book Award. So we wanted to share a little bit about Storytime from Space, since this book did have the honor of being read on the International Space Station. If you haven't heard of Storytime from Space, it's very fun and a super fun way to bring in digital storytelling into your programs. So imagine astronauts reading stories from space to children and families around the world in an exciting new program that combines literature with science education. Now you can stop imagining because it's here. So if you go to storytimefromspace.com, you can find all kinds of readings for various age groups from various STEM topics. So this is actually a picture of astronaut Koichi Wakata reading one of Jeff Bennett's other books called Max Goes to the Space Station. So that's already up on storytimefromspace.com. Totality did get read in July. So it is not on storytimefromspace.com yet, but it is coming soon to the video library, and Jeff expects that it will be up and ready to show before the annular eclipse. And also, in addition to the reading, there's a fun astronaut science demo. So once that's up, we can let you all know. We can update that on the link bank, and it should be coming early October, just in a couple of weeks. So as I mentioned, Jeff Bennett is an excellent writer, a prolific writer. There's all kinds of other books that you can check out from him. There are children's science titles available in Spanish, Japanese, as well as English. There's also public, high school, and college titles, free middle school and high school Earth and space science content. And there's also a free school visit program. So if you go to bigkidscience.com and you're interested in learning more about how you can get Jeff to visit a school or perhaps your library, just click on school programs and you can learn more about getting him in person. All right, so that is it for all of our books and authors for today. We have, let's see, about just 5 minutes left for a Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you can see the authors. And if anybody is wanting to unmute and ask questions, feel free. Otherwise, I'll take a look at the chat and see what's been going on there. Yeah, Donna says she loves the Max books. Yeah, Max goes to space, Max goes to the moon. Those are all really fun, great for story time. So yeah, check out more of Jeff Bennett's books.
While we're waiting, I put in the chat when we were talking about activities that a number of libraries are working with other community groups, in particular science-oriented groups, and that many communities do have an amateur astronomy club, a club made up of astronomy enthusiasts, and they may not be available on the day of the eclipse because they may be going to where the eclipse is best, but many libraries have set up a weekend or a week afternoon sun viewing sessions where they bring their instruments, their telescopes, but also they instruct your library patrons on how to observe safely with the glasses, what are ways of projecting an image if you run out of glasses. And so that's all discussed in the little booklet that Dennis and I wrote for libraries. And I put the URL again, bit.ly eclipses for libraries. So you can contact, there are websites for contacting your local amateur astronomy club.
Awesome, Donna. Donna said we're working with 2 NASA Solar System ambassadors for both the annular and the total, and we'll be holding the annular on October 7th to teach and orient folks to solar safety.
And there are ambassador programs, including the Solar System ambassadors, but there's also the American Astronomical Society ambassadors. These are people who have been trained to be good at outreach, to be able to explain things in non-technical terms. And again, the booklet that we wrote has links to some of those ambassador programs. So if you're not sure how to contact an ambassador near you, check out the booklet.
Yeah, thank you. Eric added, also might be worth reaching out to local or regional planetariums or observatories. They may even have access to grant funding for outreach to assist with space-related programs or even help to add circulating telescopes to your library of things. And Donna asks, where can I get the list of items included in the state library kits? I believe we have a link to that. Sky, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, let me dig that out. So I can find it.
I'll also, Donna, put my email in the chat. If we can't find it in time in the next 3 minutes, just send me an email and I can send you the list of kit materials. All right, we have a question about saving the chat and the links that we've been sharing today. Absolutely. So after every StarNet webinar, we post the recording, the chat transcript, and the link bank on our StarNet webinar page. And I will also be posting it on the SEAL community page. So if you're wanting to have access to the chat, we'll post everything after the webinar. Oh, awesome. And Sky just put another blog or a link in the chat that has all kinds of information and including the kit items that are going out in the state's circulating kits, but it also has links to the recordings of other webinars that we've done, how to access free glasses. If you haven't signed up for Eclipse glasses yet, we still have some left. So make sure that you register for your free Eclipse glasses. You can find the link to that in the link that Sky just put in, which is Get Started with SEAL. Right. Any more questions for our authors? Yeah, big thank you to all of our authors for joining us today. Such exciting and fun resources. So, all right, well, you have my email, you have Sky's email. If any questions pop up later, feel free to reach out to us. But otherwise, have a great day and good luck with the upcoming eclipses. Thanks, everybody.